Good evening, my students. So, last class we focused on public opinion and media. This class is about elections and campaigns. Well, I hope you all are safe and listening to this video from home, hunkering down. Don't go around because you don't want to get the virus, or if you have it, spread the virus. Stay home, love, enjoy watching videos, movies, and learning. Okay, let's start. Elections. So how democratic is American elections? How democratic? Well, the Constitution says the time, place, manner, it's called time, place, manner clause, is selected by the states. So even though the federal government has the Constitution, state governments also have constitutions, their own, but the Constitution of the U.S. Constitution says time, place, manner clause gives permission for states to decide. So Wyoming said we will not get the statehood in 1890 if we don't have the right for our women to vote. So they came into the Union with the right for women to vote. New York and New Jersey in the Eastern Coast, all the states did not have right for women to vote. But Wyoming had, 30 years before even New York State had. Isn't that interesting? And you probably knew about the women's struggle for voting rights. Yes, so some of the women suffragists who were campaigning against Wilson in the election campaigns, they went and campaigned in the states like Wyoming in the West, which had right for women to vote. So women voting against Wilson so that he will be out of office and some new guy will come and help them achieve their right to vote in a federal election, right, throughout the country. So states decide, correct? So that's important. Time, manner, place. And states could decide how many people are voting, not how many people are running. I'm sorry to say people are voting. How many people are running, what positions they are running for, all this could be decided. Okay. Now, how often is our elections? Can you think of? We, among all the democratically electing representatives electing countries in the world, have more often elections. That's right. Every year, we have a statewide elections. Yeah. I mean, you know, the U.S. House of Representatives are elected every 2 years, right? Every 2 years, they face the election. And who else face the election in the federal government every 2 years? That is right, the U.S. senators. Not all of them, not all the 100 of them will face. That's the key, because you know the U.S. senators are elected for 6-year terms. So why would they face every 2 years? So only 1/3 of them, so 33 or 34 based on the year, 33 or 34 U.S. senators will face election along with the 435 U.S. House of Representatives. Yes. So elections are frequent, very frequent in the United States. Why do you think that is? Why do they design to have a frequent elections? One of the reasons for having frequent elections is, that's right, accountability. To make sure your elected officials do the job we, people, want them to do. If they don't, we could throw them out and have new set of people in office who will do the job which we want them to do. So frequent elections is one of the important aspects of American democracy. Now let's see how many elected officials are there. How many elected officials do you think are there in the country? Right? I have seen people in classrooms saying like, they do the math of like counting the House of Representatives and the U.S. senators, the president, the vice president, and then they say, okay, what about the state? What about the city? That's right. You know how many governments are there? Right? We talked about this. There are like 80, 90,000 governments in the United States. Yeah, city, municipal, state. That's right. So all these governments have elected officials. We have about 530,000 elected officials in this country. This is mind-boggling. Yeah, the if the total country's population is about 330 million, right? And not all of them are able to vote because many children can't vote. So if you take roughly the math, it's one elected official for every 420 or 430 people. That's a lot of elected officials. Why do you think that is? That the system of democracy we have so many elected officials. Most other countries, democratically elected countries, not only don't have frequent elections as us, but don't have as many elected representatives as us. Why? Why do we have it? Any thoughts? That's right. We want power to be distributed. We don't want power to concentrate in one area. Remember when they overthrew a king rule in the United States, right? Revolution. They don't want a power centered in just the federal government. So it is distributed throughout different governments, and it is distributed in each of the government to different people. So the power won't be concentrated, which is dangerous for liberty, of an individual liberty. So that was the reason for frequent elections and more number of people being elected to office. Now the fourth point, right? How democratic our elections. The first one is the time, place, manner, right? The second one is how frequent our elections. The third one is how many people are getting elected. Fourth one is financing the campaigns. When you talk about financing the campaigns, this is important. This is like a 800-pound gorilla in elections. Money. You need money to run for office, right? So how do people who are running for office raise money? This is a big, important one. Okay? You can't run for office without raising money because it costs enormous amount. How much does it cost? Well, it costs in 2012 election, it cost for just the federal government, not the state, not the city, right? All the other government, just the federal government, the House of Representatives, the U.S. senators, the 1/3 of the U.S. senators, and the presidential race. It cost $6 billion. $6 billion. Can you imagine? Yeah. So it is an enormous amount of money being spent. And how do these people raise that kind of money? So that is important for us to understand. The first one, write it down, is called bundling. Bundling. Can you see it? Yeah, bundling. It's like a bundle, putting money together. This is individuals. Say, if I'm running for office, I'll have a bundler, not just one. If I'm running for federal government, especially if I'm running for president, I'll have hundreds of bundlers. What do these people do? They will say, Hill, I got your back. I will raise money for you. Yeah, well, if he writes a check for me, when I'm running in the primaries, he could write only $2,300 maximum because federal government doesn't allow, that's a law. It's a law that doesn't allow an individual to donate to a campaign more than $2,300. So that money is not going to make a big difference. So he would say, Hill, I'm going to raise money for you, the bundler. He will bring hundreds of his wealthy friends. Yeah, not everybody can give $2,300. Right? Okay. So wealthy friends together for, say, a get-together, a party, and where I am a candidate, I will go and give a speech, and they will give their checks. So this guy bundler collects all those checks, bundles it, and gives it to me. So in a night, I might be able to raise $1 million. That's right. So individually, only $2,300. That's for just primary. If I make it to the general, that'll be another $2,300. So bundlers do the job of collecting this The problem is not all bundlers can raise hefty, big amounts. They overpromise and underdeliver. That's a problem with bundlers. So Obama and other candidates, when they ran, even Trump, Hillary, they have raised hundreds of millions of dollars using bundlers. That's right. And they have hundreds of bundlers because you got to war chest, as they call war chest, quote unquote. That money is essential because you got to spend it in mailing, ads, campaign volunteers, from pizza to television ads, radio ads. Everything costs money, right? Okay. So that's bundler. That's one way to raise. Second way to raise is PAC, PAC, Political Action Committee. Write it down. Political Action Committee. What is Political Action Committee means? Political Action Committee is not an individual, it's an organization. It's an organization of at least 50 people or more, 50 or more. And these people will raise money. Here, the minimum is not $2,300 per raise. It's $5,000. That's right. PACs started coming after Citizens United case. Okay, so that's why many Democratic candidates will say we're going to overturn the Citizens United case, because most Americans don't want too much money involved in politics. Why? I'm going to talk about it. But let's talk about the ways the money is raised. PAC, Political Action Committee. So they could raise $5,000 per person. It's an organization, 50 or more. So they could raise that money and they could funnel that money into the political campaign of a candidate. So if I'm running for office or you're running for office, they could funnel that money into my campaign, not for my personal expenses. You can use political contributions for personal expenses, buying hats or glasses or a tie. No, you will go to jail for it. And it's people have done buying things for personally, and idiotically, I don't know how they would not see that, and they will end up in jail. But it is used for political campaigning, that money is. So PAC, right? And here comes super PACs. You heard of super PACs. And there are some political candidates, including Bernie Sanders, says, I don't have super PACs. What are they talking about, super PACs? Super PACs are same, Political Action Committee. But it's a super, the word right down to super. They could raise unlimited amount of money. Unlimited amount of money. But here's the important difference between a PAC and super PAC. Super PACs cannot give the money to the candidate who is running for office. That is right. They have to use that money in parallel with the campaign. Say if I'm running for office, they could use that money to that organization. Super PAC is also an organization. They could support Hill Krishnan for the office, but they cannot just give it directly to my political campaign coffers. They have to use it in parallel. They could use super PAC. Okay, you understand? And millions of dollars are raised in super PACs. Now write down the last one, 527. 527. 527 is based on the federal income tax code. So it's called 527 groups. This is also an organization. They've raised enormous amount of money. What's the difference between PAC, super PAC, and 527 groups? 527 groups is called issue advocacy. Issue. Based on issues, they advocate. So it could be if I have a 527, say I'm not a candidate, but I'm a member of the organization raising enormous amount of money for Biden, then I could use that organization. The goal could be environment. That's an issue I care about. So I might say Senator or Vice President Biden supports the environment. He doesn't want trees to be cut. I could say that. But I cannot say vote for Biden or don't vote for Trump. You can't say that. You could say support your issue and which senator is in support of the issue or opposing the issue. And here is also 527 group, the money they raise cannot give the money directly to the candidate. You see the difference? Now let's talk about why money is a problem. What do you think money is a problem? Can you guess? That's right. Because we already said not everybody can give enormous amount of money. Only the wealthy individuals can donate to the political campaigns. Then the political candidate becomes accountable to the ones who gave the money. In other words, if I'm running for office and you give me money, you are a bundler or you raise enormous money, millions, and don't you think you want something in return from me, right? When I get elected, and you will say, oh, what's wrong with that? Instead of a political elected official doing the job for the people, I am doing what is good for you, and that good for you might violate what is good for the people. It becomes a word, write it down, oligarchy. Oligarchy. Not democracy, oligarchy. That is rule by the few. Okay? Oligarchy. And especially plutocracy is another word. Plutocracy. That's rich people ruling. Plutocracy, oligarchy. Oligarchy ruled by few, rich ruling. So because they give the money, the elected officials are accountable to them instead of being accountable to the people. Because in a democracy, they should be accountable to the people rather than to the rich. So that's why most of Americans don't want too much money involvement in politics. But it is becoming more and more enormous amount of money being involved in office, right? For running for House of Representatives. It used to be in the 1970s, $30,000, $40,000 you could run, good money. Now you can't even run for city council with that money. You need 1.5, 2 million, a decent. Some people raise now Ocasio-Cortez is raising more than $3-4 million because he has many challenges. So the money is going up. For U.S. Senate, $15 million. You think you can raise $15 million? Imagine you asking your Facebook friends, hey, can I have $100? Unfriend, unfriend, unfriend. So many of them will be unfriending you. Maybe your mom will give, your aunt will give. Where are you going to raise $15 million from? And especially if you're running for president, hundreds of millions of dollars, like $500 million you got to raise to be a top tier candidate. How are you going to raise that? Like Bloomberg alone spent his own personal money, about $1 billion. Failed candidacy, but raised about $1 billion. Spent his own money. So not everybody can spend that kind of money or raise from their family. So they have to ask people who are wealthy. And when wealthy people give, that's possible to expect quid pro quo. I give you, what are you going to give me back? And what they give back? Yeah, in interest groups. They write laws that will create loopholes to benefit the ones who give money. So if corporations give you money, you write tax loopholes so that corporations doesn't need to pay as much tax as you and me, percentage. Yeah, Amazon paid 0% tax, federal tax last year. Apple paid 0% tax. Wouldn't you like to be paying 0%? I would like to pay 0% tax, or even 10%. Because we don't have such influence in the Congress, so corporate loopholes, and even wealthy people. So we could talk about that's a public policy on taxes, how there's so many ways the wealthy could evade paying high percentage legally. And why? Because people who get elected to the office, accountable to them, create the loopholes for them. Okay, now we talked so far about different ways you could raise money. Now we're going to talk about who runs for office, especially presidency. Let's talk about that. Presidency, who runs for it? Would you run for president? Yeah? Anybody here listening to this? I've seen in a class of 40, 50, sometimes Zero. Nobody wants to run for president. But I will ask the question, if it is given to you, you don't need to run, would you take it? Then maybe one or two will raise the hand. I doubt even them will do it in reality. Yeah. Because Abraham Lincoln said, the presidency is not a bed of roses even for an experienced politician. It's not easy. It's thorns, a lot of thorns. So what's hard about it to even run for office? The first one, write it down. It's expensive, very expensive to run for office. Well, we just talked about raising money. Costs enormous money to raise, hundreds of millions of dollars, right? And even $1 billion, that doesn't guarantee you the presidency. So it's expensive. Second, privacy shredding. It will shred your privacy. Let me put it this way. The media will dig out even what you have said in the 6th grade if you were mean because you were hungry. Hungry. Yeah, angry and hunger. And you were a 6th grader and you were mean to somebody. And that will be in the front page. Would you be fine with that? That's privacy shredding. When Andrew Jackson ran for office, a newspaper wrote an article about how Andrew Jackson's mother was a prostitute, even though she wasn't. And he cried when he read that. He's like, and she was gone. Her mother was no more. Writing like that, he felt that his mother has been insulted. Of course, anybody will feel that. How would you feel running for office and every nook and corner of your from personal health to what you did, everything is put out? Not everybody will be open to that kind of scrutiny, would you? Yeah, that's the problem. So second is privacy shredding. The first one is expensive. The third is exhausting. It's exhausting to run for office. 1.5, 2 years, you got to campaign, sleep 2-3 hours, and keep going. Would you do it? I mean, going to school and having a job is very hard, right? I commend students who are able to do that full-time job and full-time school. Ooh. Presidency, running for office is like 10 times harder, despite being not able to sleep because you had like a few hours sleep. Imagine you're running for office. And you didn't have a proper breakfast and you were hungry and you go to campaign, say a rally, and somebody in there says, screw you, man, screw you. What would you say? You feel like, screw you too. That's it. If you say that in return, that most probably your campaign is done. You smile, screw you. Oh, I'm sorry you feel that way. Yeah. Where do you get that energy? The ability to resist, to curse back, and hold that with your prefrontal cortex. Yes, that's the one which gives you the ability to resist and say a nice thing when somebody says a mean thing. That's hard. It's exhausting, right? And that is how running for office is. This is the tip of the iceberg. Okay. Now, once you write that down, we're going to talk about the three different stages of a political campaign, especially in a presidential campaign. Okay, presidential campaign. The first one, this is a term, three stages, a term. Primaries, write it down, primaries. So candidates run in primaries. Before, I'm talking about in 19th century and others, usually party bosses decide in the backroom politics who gets to run their candidates, right? And then conventional floors, fights, they decide. Party decides, they call it. When I was in my PhD program, we got to read an entire book called Party Decides. Now, more and more candidates run. It started happening in the 1960s. Yeah, when Lyndon Johnson was president, Democratic president, and he was very unpopular because of the Vietnam War. And his own party member, senator, U.S. senator, who's the same party as Lyndon Baines Johnson, the president, decided to run. And that was very unusual against him. And he started gaining momentum from especially college students who were very opposed to the Vietnam War. And so the primary system began. So people choose now, and the party follows. Party will back up the candidate. So you see now primaries is happening. And Vice President Biden didn't win any of the first few states until South Carolina. So if he didn't win, say for example, all the states, despite being the vice president before, he wouldn't have the chance to win the party's nomination, right? Before it will be like, oh, party members will decide, okay, yeah, he is the man. Like Hillary Clinton, party's favorite when she ran, and she has to fight hard against Bernie Sanders. That's how primaries, people decide. But in primaries, mostly, the members of the party vote. People in the middle don't come to vote. Yes. And in primaries, when you're running, you are usually going to the extreme. That means if you're a Democrat, you're going to the left because your attack is going to come, your flank. Have you heard of this statement? In military, they say you don't get flanked. You don't get attacked from the side, because in state you could attack, but flanked you won't be able to defend. You get flanked from a far left candidate if you're a Democrat. If you're right, Republican, your attack could come from the far right, because the people who are voting in those primary elections are your party members. So you don't need to worry about winning the support of the people in the middle, which are not usually voting in the primaries. Yeah, especially in Republican primaries now. Democratic primaries, some states allow to vote, allow people in the middle, that is independents, to vote. Even if you don't have a card carrying Democrat, you could vote. But it depends on the state. Remember, states decide. That's right. States decide. So that is and Super Tuesday, you heard of this, right? Which just happened. Super Tuesday is the big, usually like Iowa and New Hampshire and Nevada, South Carolina, all this individually happen. Then comes Super Tuesday. Boom, California, Texas, all these big states in play. And it's huge states because the population is high. Among the contiguous states, California has the highest number of people. And it has a huge number of votes to get. And I want to talk to you about something to understand. So if I, Hill, and say Sam, another guy, are running, it depends on the state how beneficial for us. There are two types of system. So write it down. It's called winner take all. That's one type of system. Winner take all. And the second type of system is proportional representation, or proportionate allocation, not representation, allocation, proportionate allocation. So winner take all is called WAT. WAT. They put it as WAT. That means some states will have proportional representation. Some states will have winner take all. How do we know that? Well, states decide, remember? So in the primary, which recently happened, California is a proportional representation. That means you have to have a threshold. Say Texas was also proportional representation. You have to pass a threshold of at least 15% of the votes you should get. And if you do that, so me and Sam are running, remember? And if Sam won, say only two people are running, forget about others. Sam won 55% of the state's votes. And I won 45% of the state's votes. That is the people who have voted, not the entire voter population. 45%. I will get 45% of the delegates of the state. And he will get 55% of the state's delegates if it's a proportional representation. So California and Texas with proportional representation will get based on how much percentage we get. So if Sam won 90% of the state's votes, I won 10%, how much delegates will I get? 0. Because I didn't pass that 15% threshold, so I won't get anything. But states like South Carolina, winner take all. That means whoever wins get the entire electoral college vote. Okay? Now, I will talk about this winner take all again in general election. Maybe I'll say it here. In general election, what is general election? That is the last stage. The three stages of presidential campaign: primary, you could write it down. Third is convention. Second is convention. Third is general election. I'll tell you, in general election, there's only two states which has proportional representation. Anybody know what are the two states which have proportional representation? Maine and Nebraska. That's right. The small states compared to, in voting, number of people compared to the big states. Winner take all. Constitution did not say how states should decide what they should have, whether they should have a winner take all or proportional representation. It did not. It left it to the states. And most of the states decided to have winner take all. You know why? Why most states decide winner take all? If Sam and I are running, okay, and we are focusing on, say, state A is winner take all. Assume the state both are same size, okay? And here it's proportional representation. This is winner take all. Sam and I will focus more on here than here. You know why? Because even if I lose this state, say by 5% or 10%, say 5%, I will still get 45% of the delegates. Here, if I lose, I don't get anything. If I win, I'll get everything. That'll put a big advantage for me over Sam. So I want to win. I will focus on state A over state B. That made race to the bottom. All the states decided we're going to have winner take all, so that candidates will focus on our state more than others. Well, you know Electoral College, right? We talked about Electoral College. About 5 presidents have been elected without winning the popular vote, right? And so one of the remedy for that Electoral College change, if they want to change without changing the Constitution, is for states to have proportional representation that will reflect the will of the people. But Republicans in general do not want to have proportional representation in all states or want to change anything because it favors them now with the winning this way, even if they don't win the popular vote. Yes. And the reason said by conservatives is the Constitution or the founding fathers want our system to work in a way that favors the smaller states. Yeah. I know this is a little harder for you to comprehend over the head. I'll come back to it when I talk about exclusively presidency and others. Now, I just want you to learn winner take all and proportional allocation. Now you know, okay? All right. Now let's move on to, after the primary is over, primary decides who is going to be the nominee of the party. You know, since the country's inception, of course, George Washington, when he was there, nobody opposed him, 2 times president. And then John Adams, his vice president, became president. Political party division started. Jefferson started a party. And since then, there's always a party fight. Party's nominee wins it. No independent candidates have ever won election for presidency in America. Even though there are candidates who ran well and got some votes, decently well, but that's not going to make them win the presidency. Like Teddy Roosevelt, Bull Moose Party, yeah. And even individual billionaire like Ross Perot, right, when he ran against Bill Clinton and Senior Bush, they got decent percentage, but that's not going to make them win the presidency. So party is key. And whoever wins the party's nomination, one of the party, only it's a 2-party system here. Yes. If you go to India or many other countries, democratic countries, Israel, there are multiple parties. Here, 2-party system. So coming back, you win the nomination. Now you stand a good chance of winning your race, final race. Before that, we go to second stage, convention, parties convention. Why do they have this convention? Have you ever thought about it? Why do they have it? Yes, for multiple reasons. The convention is to unite the party because, say, 5 candidates ran, right? Right now, Bernie is running, Biden is running, and in the past, little while ago, Elizabeth Warren was running, and Amy Klobuchar was running, right? Pete Buttigieg, all these candidates, there are people who support them also. Of course, some of them have already endorsed Biden, but Elizabeth Warren hasn't endorsed. And all these candidates will come behind the candidate who wins the party's nomination because you want to unite the party. Because if you don't unite the votes, people won't come out to vote. Say if I'm not, but say I am Amy Klobuchar's supporter. And say Biden wins the nomination of Bernie. I'm like, I'm not going to go out and vote. Either Amy or I'm not voting. So Amy has to come to the convention and tell that not Hill, but people who are my supporters, come out and vote. And so then I will go out and support the candidate who won the nomination. And so you bring the party together, one, and also this is an opportunity for people in the party to jockey for power with the nominee. So for positions, already they want to know not only the presidential nominee, but party's nominee, but also the advisors. Yeah, they might win, maybe 50-50 chance. They might win the presidency. So they want to create, and when you have a convention, boom, there's a bump in the polls. That bump usually lasts for a few days to few weeks, and it comes down. So they have a convention, and also the party gives money, support. So whoever is going to win this nomination, mostly Biden, is going to get the support of President Obama. And he will come out and campaign because he has his followers still. And so perhaps also Bill Clinton and others might come out and campaign for them, which might boost their chances of winning. Okay. Now that's convention. Similarly, Republican convention will also happen. With Donald Trump already being president, you don't need to do another primary for them, right? He's already in office. And of course, that doesn't mean somebody from Republican could challenge, but they haven't challenged. It could happen, like I said, with LBJ's case, they did challenge from his own party. Okay, now let's talk about after convention, the general election. That's where the real battle begins. And these candidates, so can an independent run in the general election? Yes, they can. Yes, they can. But here's an important thing. Independent, if they are strong and which side they are leaning, they're going to split the vote. What do you mean? Okay. Teddy Roosevelt was president for 2 terms. Listen to this story. And he loves being president. He was a good president. And he went away. What do you mean went away? After his presidency, he just went on a tour to Africa and other places. And his vice president and Europe and other to meet the kings, queens, and head of states. And he came back to America. And he wasn't happy with his vice president being president now and the way he is governing. That was Taft. And Taft was very not so progressive as Teddy Roosevelt was. They were both are Republicans. And so Teddy Roosevelt wants to run again for office. But Taft is like, I just have completed only 1 term. I want to run for a 2nd term. So they ran to get the party's nomination. And Taft won. They didn't run in the primary, which Teddy Roosevelt would have, in the primary with the people like we have, he would have won. Party decided, and Taft became the Republican nominee. And Teddy Roosevelt was upset. He went out and started his own freaking party, Bull Moose Party. And he ran in the general election. And there was a Democrat who was also running, and his name was Woodrow Wilson. So now Woodrow Wilson, Teddy Roosevelt, Taft, they're running, right? People looked at Teddy Roosevelt and Taft, and Republican voters, the votes were divided among them. whoever they liked most. That helped Woodrow Wilson, and he won the election. So votes could get split in general election. There's an independent candidates. Some people would say Ross Perot divided the votes for Bush, and that's helped Bill Clinton won the race. So you have to be careful if you're throwing in the hat in the race. That's why Bloomberg has said he will not throw his hat as an independent to run for president, because that will help Donald Trump win the second term. Okay? In general election, that's where the money, big money is spent. Huge amount of money. Primaries, not so much. General election, you have to win the people in the middle, and even possible, the people in the other side, if possible. So you're campaigning, and the race, all states, 50 states, the election happens, boom, the result starts coming by night. And the Electoral College, the magic number, whoever reaches it, what's the number? I've taught you how to get to the number, 270. That's right. Remember that? 435, 100, DC3, and 538. Yeah? Divided by 2, because 2 candidates, divided by 2, right? 269 divided by 2 is, yes? And whoever gets 270 or above become the president of the United States. That's the Electoral College method. Okay, now let's talk about, one second, let me erase this. All right. Let's talk about winning a presidential election. What do you need in a general election? What do you need to win a general election? So the first one you need to win a general election, the candidate's economic outlook. Yeah, in the 19th century, Lincoln didn't campaign about economic policies. No, it all changed after, yes, FDR ran for office, because Big Depression, economics was the main focus. Since then, the presidents focus a lot on economics. In fact, research shows if you're incumbent, that means you're in office, in any office, presidential incumbent, say if I'm presidential incumbent, that means I'm the president currently. And it's not good for me if the economy is not doing well. That means stock market keep going, economy is buzzing, and second factor, unemployment should be down. If the unemployment numbers are high and the economy is going down, dangerous for incumbent. I could be kicked out of office, because people are like, oh, we'll give a chance to another guy. Americans will not tolerate if the economy is doing bad. So now you could say it in current, as of now, the economy is completely down. It was doing well, and it's down now because of the coronavirus crisis. And will that have an effect on Trump? Technically, yes, but it's too early, because say, for example, if the conditions reverse, but it's too fast to reverse before November election, but if it reverses, then he has things in his favor. Otherwise, it'll work against him, and that's dangerous for him. Good for the candidate who is running against him, who is Biden, possibly. So economic outlook. Candidates will always promise that your better days are ahead of us, and we are going to do well. Imagine if you're a candidate running for office, you go up there and say, my dear fellow Americans, I could only see darkness and gloom. I think our better economic times are over, and please vote for me. You think you'll get votes? Even your grandma might not vote for you. That's right. It's promise, and you have to deliver. You have to improve the economy. And even though some scholars would say the president is not completely responsible for the economy, there are so many factors. Still, it's the responsibility of the presidential campaign to address economy. In fact, Bill Clinton's campaign coined the term, the economy stupid. Yes, his advisor wrote that on the board so that they could focus again and again on the economy, the stupid. So Bush administration was defeated because the economy was not doing well. So Bill Clinton became the president. So economics, the first thing to focus. The second thing is demographics. Demographics. What's demographics mean? We talked about that before. Demo means people, graphics, numbers, statistics. So each party's candidate nominee has a particular group of people to focus. I'll give you an example. Remember Trump when he was running for office? He said, I love the uneducated and undereducated. So usually people who are poor and less educated, white, poor, white, less educated, have been supporters of Republican Party, the recent modern American history. Whereas if you take minorities, in general, this is generalization, of course, exceptions are there. Minorities are big supporters of Democratic candidate. So based on your party and which party's nominee you are, you target those groups because they have to come out and vote. Yeah, you could have their support, but they're not coming out and voting. You're goner. So you have to get their support to win the election, and you focus on them. That's demographics. Third one, write it down, is war and foreign policy. When you're running for office, you have to, you know how hard it is? We talked about how hard it is. But how hard it is to remember the details of foreign policy of every country which is outside, even Far East or Middle East. Like, for example, I'll give you, when Bush ran for office and he didn't know Taliban. He thought it's a band, music band or something. And I watched this debate. Trump was running for office. They asked nuclear triad. None of the candidates on the Republican stage knew except Marco Rubio. Okay? Marco Rubio, Senator. Marco Rubio knew. Others, Trump is like, I'll deal with it. Nuclear triad, to make it quick, is how the three different ways we could deliver nuclear weapons to an enemy in conflict. And so you have to know all these details. Most people don't have the ability. Well, those people can't run. Like, for example, Texas governor, when he ran for office, and he forgot, when he ran for president, he forgot the three departments he wants to remove from the federal government list. So he said, like, education, energy, he forgot the third one. And people was like, boom. After that, his numbers went down in the poll. So you have to remember so many facts about foreign policy and war. And people will judge you not just based on your knowledge, but how you will be able to handle crisis, especially war and relationship with other countries. And so that you have to address on the stage when you're running. The next one is domestic issues. Domestic issues is a whole different genre. You have to know clearly different issues that is affecting the country at the particular juncture of your political campaign. So, for example, Bernie now focuses all the time on inequality in America, the gap between the rich and the poor. And so he's always talking about inequality is increasing. The rich gets richer and richer. The millionaires and the billionaires. He talks about it, right? Every time you ask him how the weather is in Vermont, he will be like, the millionaires and the billionaires. How's the weather? So he brings to the issue. That's the brilliancy of a campaign, because you come back, whatever is asked to you, come to the issue, and you focus on the issue which the voters care about. So domestic issues, which they care about, like Bill Clinton ran on Medicare, Medicaid, all those things, domestic issues. Now, inequality is a big thing. Student loans and all this all affects the inequality. The next point, write it down, is campaign organization. Campaign organization. So to win the presidential election, we're talking about 5 of them, right? This is the 5th one. I repeated: economic outlook and demographics, war and foreign policy, domestic issues, and the 5th one is organization. You need a campaign organization on the ground. If you don't have that, it's hard to campaign and succeed. That means people who could go state to state and get out the people to vote. Get out the vote. Have you seen it? GOTVOTE. Get out the vote. Got vote. That you have to get out the people to vote. And if the general election, 50 states election happens at the same time, and especially in the toss-up states, that means the states which could go either way to Democrat or Republican, that's where you have ground game, they call it. People who are willing, organizations on the ground, making sure your voters come to the polls and vote. Okay, so now we talked so far about presidential election. Let's take a turn and talk about congressional elections and campaigns. Congressional elections and campaigns. So people who are running for Congress. Remember, there's a House, 435 people running. And in the 100, not all 100 are running. That's correct. 1/3 of them are running. Now, what are the requirements? Can anyone run? Can anybody run? Can a foreign immigrant run? He hasn't been a citizen. No, you got to be a citizen, right? Yeah, that's a basic. What are the other basic criteria? Let's get that off before we move further. That's right. Age requirement, write it down. Age, residency. That's right. Age, residency. And so when you talk about age, residency, citizenship, you got to be a citizen. Now, some people in citizenship, let's talk about that, would be a naturalized citizen, like me. I wasn't born here. I immigrated here and become a citizen. So I'm a naturalized citizen, and you all know a naturalized citizen cannot run for president or vice president because of the Article 2, Section 3 of the U.S. Constitution, which says natural born clause, right? Can you run for Congress? Can I run for Congress? Naturalized citizen? Yes, you can. Yes, I can. How long you have to be a citizen before you run for the Congress? 7 years you have to be a citizen. You cannot just come in and become a citizen and run. Why did they do that? They did that so that somebody from another country comes and runs and become a member of the Congress and influence American policies in favor of their home country. So this is to make sure that the policy, this is to make sure that your affiliation is to the country. You live here, be a citizen for a while. So 7 years for House of Representatives, 9 years for the U.S. Senate. That's right. That's the citizenship requirement. 9 years you have to be a citizen for the U.S. Senate. Age, 25 for House of Representatives, 30 for U.S. Senate, right? You could, not at the time of running, you could be 24 when you're running, but when you're taking oath of office, you have to be 25, right? And what about residency? Do you need to be part of the state where you're running? Yes and no. As for the state, if you're running for U.S. Senator, you have to be in the state. In the Congress race, that's a district, right? You don't need to live in the district. You have to live in the state, but you don't need to live in the district. You could be outside the district. Of course, your opponent is going to attack you, saying that he doesn't even live in the district and he's running for your problems to represent you. So you could technically be not in the district and run, but you have to be at least part of the state. Okay, those are the basic criteria. Let's get that out. And now let's talk about the personality of the person who's running for office for Congress. What type of personalities? I know, I hear your joke. You got to be crazy to run for office. Yeah, you got to be crazy. But what type of personality, really speaking? That's right. The personality is leadership. You have to demonstrate leadership. Interest in politics, at the least. You have to be educated, right? You don't need to be, who's the only president in the 20th century who didn't have a college degree? Harry S. Truman. Well, but he was a voracious reader. He read the library next to his home completely, all the historical books, and his fascinating stories. Anyway, he knows history. He knows history. However, you don't need to have an educational degree, right? But the personality aspect leadership, highly educated, and usually lawyers run for office. You don't see teachers or many doctors running for office. It's lawyers or engineers, even though we do need eclectic, diverse thoughts, not just the same type of thinking there, because you can solve problems with the same type of thinking. You need diverse. Okay, that's my opinion. And so there are some people who are highly educated and things. What about money? I mean, I'm not talking about the money they raise for election. What about the money, their personal wealth, net wealth? Do you think they are wealthy? Do you think they are poor? Do you think they are billionaires? No, they're not billionaires. There's no billionaire in House of Representatives or Senate. Yeah, president, they will run, Bloomberg ran, right? And Tom Steyer ran, who's a billionaire. But are they like poor? No, they're not poor. Do you think they're middle class? That means like median household income, like 55,000? No. These guys are, most of them are millionaires who are sitting in Congress. Yes. They're not getting paid in millions. You know how much they get paid? About $170,000. Yeah. That's almost 4 times of the median household income, or at least 3 times of the median household income of the United States. Yeah, some people will say that's a lot of money, but some House of Representatives say, oh, DC is expensive, we can't afford things with this money, so many things, argument. So people's personality. Now I want to ask, can you win the election if you're a celebrity? Everybody knows your name. Taylor Swift, Beyonce, or Michael Jordan, the actor. Boom. Yeah, it's a sue-in? No, research shows celebrity status is not a sue-in. In fact, it'll be a tough fight. What about if you're wealthy, independently wealthy, you have money? Will that be a sue-in? Nope. No. Research shows, yeah, surprising. You could spend the money and get defeated. Oh, yeah. And you saw Bloomberg campaign recently, right? About $1 billion, and he didn't win, even the party's nomination. So money is not. But there's one thing that could get you votes, guarantee, increase your chances of winning, and that is family name associated with politics. If you're Bush, last name, running in Texas, if you're Kennedy, running in Massachusetts, that's going to help you. Yeah, that'll help you a lot because people associate your name with what they know, and boom, you get a chance. You don't even need to personally introduce yourself to each of them when you're campaigning. You get their votes. That's how influential. Now, what about gender and race? Gender. Do you think women, if they're running for office, then it's easier or harder? It's actually, in the chances, technically, research shows, is same as a man, chances of winning. But when a woman announces her candidacy, men think, oh, I could defeat her easily, and they get a lot of competitors. Yeah. And do you think women are represented enough in the House of Representatives? No. What's the population percentage? They are more than 50%, right? At least 50% of the population is women. You know how much percentage of Congress is women? Until the recent election, it was less than 20%. Now it just made it 20% and above. It's not 50%. What about the race? When you say race, color, African Americans, are there enough African Americans? No. In fact, there are 13 or 14% of the population. There are approximately 10% represented in Congress, so slightly less than the general population's percentage. However, if you look at the U.S. Senate, the higher chamber, there's currently only 3 black people in the 100. So that's 3%, right? Out of 13%. Most of them are white. Even in the past, Obama, and if you go to 19th century, you got to go like 4 people. So totally like 7 people, black people, have been in the U.S. Senate in the history of this country. That's right. Yeah, so race and gender is not equally represented. It's usually white men are represented in the U.S. Congress, even though the population demographics doesn't reflect that. Yeah, okay. So some people want things to change, but it's a slow process. It is happening, but it's slow, very deliberate, slow process. Now, gender, race. What about talent and experience? Oh yeah, if you have talent in political organization, if experience, and if you have education in experience in politics and things, that helps a lot in party reaching out to you and making you run. What about if you're an incumbent? Remember, I already explained what incumbent is. If you're running against an incumbent, what are your chances of winning for a House seat? Over the years, House seat, your chance might be maybe 3, 4%, 5%. That's it. 95% the incumbent is going to win. Yeah. And in the US Senate, if you look at last 10, 20 races of the US Senate, you would see maybe a little more increase. Still 90% chances they're going to win. Yeah. So incumbent has a huge advantage. You risk spending money, energy, time, hard work, and your ideas won't get reflected in the votes. And that's what incumbent advantage is. Okay, let's talk about how to run for Congress. What are the things you need? To run for Congress, you need money. We talked about it. First, you got to raise money. You got to be independently wealthy to spend, or you got to raise about $2 million, 1.5, depending on the district, of course. And some districts, 3, 4, the money is increasing. And next one is, but that doesn't guarantee you victory. We talked about it. Organization. You have to have an organization, ground game. You have to have people who are willing to go and organize and get the people out to vote. That's important. Okay? And that's why sometimes people who are being in an organization for a while, like political or non-political organizations who know the people in the district, they could organize and transfer that into votes. Strategy. You have to have a strategy when you're running for office. How are you going to win? What is your strategy to reach out to people? How are you going to reach out? Is it mail? Is it going to be TV? Because TV ads are very expensive. Even for presidential elections, Texas and California are expensive states for TV ads. Even many presidential candidates cannot afford. So if you're running for US Senate in these states, how are you going to reach out to the people? People got to know you to vote for you. So the strategy, you have to have a strategy, and you have to reach out to organizations which could endorse you. What is the strategy for it? Strategy is the overarching aim, plan to achieve your goal. I'm not talking about tactics, which is smaller, day to day, overall strategy. And then the last one, message. You need a message which is very strong, which sounds honest and clear, so it resonates with the people as well. There's 3 things has to be there. The message has to resonate with the people with the current crisis or problem in hand, and how you could be the one to solve it or help the people improve their lives. Well, that's what the purpose of running for office, right? Genuine purpose is to improve the life of the people, other than the ego trip many do. So that's how you run for political office. Let's talk about this last 3. With this, the class is over. Reforms. Write it down. Reforms. Reforms. Political reforms in campaigns. 3 things we need this. We need this badly, according to most scholars. And the first one is gerrymandering. Gerrymandering. I'm going to write it down and then show you. Don't worry. Gerrymandering, R-I-N-G at the bottom. Gerrymandering, one word. This came because of Massachusetts Governor Jerry. This is a big problem, and let me make it simple. Imagine this is a state. This is a state, okay? It sounds a little bit like Nebraska. And the state has district lines drawn, right? District lines where House of Representatives are elected. Say there are only 3 districts, just to make it simple. I don't want to draw a complex state diagram and divide it into different ways. So just make it 3. Okay. So the shaded region. Say the shaded region is Democratic Party members strong in the state. The white is Republican strong. Okay? Now, if the election happens as it is, there will be 2 Democratic candidates winning and 1 Republican. Correct? Yes? Yeah. Because these 2 districts is Democratic stronghold. And so if I become a governor, say I am a Republican, I want to change this. I want to make more Republican wins. So if I erase this part, this lines, this vertical lines, and I draw horizontal district lines like this. Same 3 districts, but it's drawn differently. Done differently. What do you think happens? Yes, there's Republican, but because of this majority of Democrats, it's going to go Democratic. This is going to go Democratic. So I'm a Democratic governor. Sorry, I said Republican governor. If I'm a Democratic governor, I want more Democrats to win, so I could change that 1 Republican district into also a Democratic district. So it'll be all 3 Democratic districts. Are you following it? Because 2 advantage over 1, because I drawn it horizontally rather than the vertical lines. This is called gerrymandering. And how do you fix this? This is a problem, because it's sending people of my party more to the Congress and to the state Senate and state assembly based on how I draw. Sometimes the drawings of the states is crazy. Like the district will go like this, like a snake. It's like this. And the people here cannot vote in this district. Here cannot vote in this district. So like, and so the problem is there. To solve it, sometimes some states, governors appoint 3 or 4 Democrat and 3 or 4 Republicans. So they go, so it's a bipartisan committee who go and draw the lines, which is not favoring of one party over the other, equally agreeing and distributing. That's one reform, essential. Not all states have done it. Some states have. Second one is money. We talked about the problem of money, right, in politics. And I don't need to say what the problem is because I already talked enough about it. Oligopoly, remember? Right. Oligarchy, plutocracy. Now, how do we reduce this? So some candidates say we're going to overturn Citizens United. There was another case in 2014, McCutcheon versus FEC. McCutcheon versus FEC. FEC means Federal Election Commission. It's an independent body which controls, makes sure the federal election laws are followed. McCutcheon is an Alabama man who wants to donate how much ever money he wants to give. He thought it is a freedom of speech issue. So the Supreme Court ruled in his favor against the FEC so that he could give how much ever he wants. And so many super PACs and other things which we talked about came, and there is so much money involved now. And most of Americans want to reduce money involvement. They know the problem, but it is not their top priority issue. Right now, it's coronavirus is the top priority issue. So they're not focusing on it. They're not focusing on it. And because they're not focusing on it, putting the pressure, it's not going to get changed easily. The next and the last one, discussion of the class, the third reform is term limit. I don't need to spell it. You know how to spell term limit for who? You know the presidency have term limits, right? Yeah. What's the constitutional amendment which created the term limit for the president? That's right, 22nd Amendment. I helped you to remember 22nd, 2 terms. All right, happened with Truman administration. So that's 2 terms. Governors, some states have term limits. They cannot run more than 2 or 3 terms. And mayors have term limits. Why not? And city council in New York, 2 terms. Even city council members, the legislative body, they can run more than that. Why is the members of Congress allowed to run as many number of times as they want? Some people stay for the rest of their lives. There's arguments on both sides. Some people say you need experience how to maneuver through the congressional process and make things happen. Okay? And there's the other side of argument. Power corrupts, absolute power absolutely corrupts. Staying there for a long time, these guys become more and more corrupted because they are obligated to the people who give them money to re-elect them rather than being obligated to the people to do the job. If you are just 2 terms, say, second term, you don't need to worry about satisfying the guys who gave you the money because you're not going to run for third term. You can't run for third term, so you don't need to ask them for money for third term. So you could do what is good for the people or the country. That is an argument. But term limits, there are organizations pushing to make that happen, that reform to happen, but that's also not a priority for American public. So these are the 3 election campaign reforms, problems and reforms necessary. Whether it'll happen now or in the future, only God knows. I will see you later. Make sure you answer the questions. 3 interesting things you learn from this lecture. Throughout, don't focus on the first half of the lecture or second half. Distribute it. And I will looking forward to reading your answers. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.